This morning, as we look at the text, there's a clear theme that comes from it. It is regarding faith and the importance of faith, and oftentimes how difficult faith can be in our lives. To that end, there is a made-up story of a man who was walking on a mountainside, and he slipped and fell off a cliff. As he fell, he grabbed a branch on the way down. As he hung there, he began to get tired. His body was giving out. So he looks up to heaven and he asks, "Is there anybody up there?" And a voice comes back. It says, "I'm here. Do you believe me?" So he responds, "Yes, I believe. I believe, but I'm getting tired. I can't hold on much longer. Can you help me?" The voice comes back. It says, "If you believe, you know that I can help you. Just let go." So the man stops for a second and he thinks. He looks back to heaven and he says, "Is there anybody else up there?" Faith is not always the easiest to come by. That's why Augustine said it this way: God does not expect us to submit our faith to him without reason. But the very limits of our reason make faith a necessity. In other words, what he's saying, God doesn't ask us to blindly believe in him. And you hear the term blind faith, and I just don't think that's accurate. I think there's evidence all around us that God is real and God is there. And so it's not a blind faith, but because of the limits of who we are as people, faith becomes a necessity because we don't fully understand God, but we can trust him and know that he is there. So if you will join me in Mark chapter 9 this morning, we're going to continue our look at Mark's gospel account. So Mark 9 will begin in verse 14, and we'll read through verse 29. Mark 9, beginning in verse 14, reads, "And when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. And he asked them, 'What are you arguing about with them?' And someone from the crowd answered him, 'Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able.' And he answered them, 'O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me.' And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, 'How long has this been happening to him?' And he said, 'From childhood. And it has often cast him into fire and water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us.' And Jesus said to him, 'If you can, all things are possible for one who believes.' Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, 'I believe, help my unbelief.' And when Jesus saw the crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, 'You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, you come out of him and never enter him again.' After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, 'He is dead.' But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he rose. And when he entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, 'Why could we not cast it out?' And he said to them, This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer." In verse 14, when it says they, it's referring to James and Peter and John and Jesus coming back down from the mountain. As we saw last week, they were on Mount Hermon during the Transfiguration. And they've been separated from the rest of the disciples for this time, where Peter, James, and John had been allowed to see that, to experience that, when the rest of them had not. They left them behind on the level ground. So as they returned to them and to see what's going on, Jesus notices that they're arguing. They're in a big argument with the crowd around them. In fact, they're arguing with the scribes. So when they see Jesus, the crowd drops what they're doing and they come running to him. And they've been dealing with his disciples, but he was the real reason that they were there. He's the one that they truly wanted to see. Jesus inquires, "What are you arguing over? What is this debate about?" And when he asks that, he wants to know what has caused such a scene to take place in the little time that he's gone. I mean, he's up on the mountain and says, guys, come on. I leave for a little while and thing has just degraded and devolved into chaos. And what is going on here? What has happened? And so a father who had brought his son to Jesus because the boy is tormented by an evil spirit that has made him deaf and mute. In fact, he explains that the spirit attacks the boy physically and is completely taking control over him. The disciples had made an attempt to remove the spirit, but were unable. Now, this seems very interesting when you look at the fact back in chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. And he appointed the 12, whom he also named apostles, so they might be with him, and he might send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. And later in chapter 6, verses 12 and 13, it says, so they went out, proclaimed that the people should repent. And they cast out many demons and anointed oil who were among them and healed them. So the disciples had already been sent out twice and had been given power and authority over demons. Why now in this situation could they not? What was the problem? Was there something new? Was there something different? Or something happened to them that they couldn't cast this demon out? And certainly this is what led to the evolving situation that they were in here. The scribes, of course, had come along and said, we told you guys. When they brought this child to the disciples, they couldn't cast him out. If you remember, the scribes and the Pharisees had a habit of following him around and wanting to see what happened so they could confront him, so they could argue with him, so they could try to point out flaws or something. So when the disciples couldn't cast this demon out, certainly they were standing there ready to pounce. We told you guys, they're useless. They're a bunch of goofs. Why would you follow them? They can't even cast out this demon. Now, truth be known, they had probably been given the opportunity themselves, at least for the religious elite, to cast this demon out and couldn't do it either. Because the father would do anything to save his child. But they loved it. In fact, they pointed out their flaws and said, by transfer, it means Jesus is no good too. Don't listen to these guys. And the disciples must have come back and says, no, you have it all wrong. Jesus is telling the truth. You guys aren't. And this big debate just blows up. And they're arguing on and on about what's going on here. And this has led to the situation that Jesus has walked into. Very often, we fail just as the disciples did. And when we fail, our detractors love to point out, oh, you Christians think you're so perfect. You think you're so wonderful, but look, you failed. Well, Christians never said that we were perfect. We said we were forgiven. And that we fail, and we fall at times. And there's a point in that. But the truth is when we fail, we can look to the one who is a perfecter of our faith, Jesus Christ, because he never fails, because he is perfect. So we always have that. We always have him there with us. We have to remember in all this that they're not fighting against the crowds. They're not fighting against the scribes. They're not fighting against the Pharisees. This is a spiritual battle that's going on here. And I think very often we miss that. If we look at Ephesians 6, verse 12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, and against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. This is the reality of what's going on. We're not against the world. We're not fighting the world. We're fighting the spiritual powers that want to put us down. And that's what the disciples had faced here, and they had failed in this account where they had been given the opportunity to do this. Jesus comes back and calls them a faithless generation. He says, you're a faithless generation. It's not clear from the scriptures exactly, is he talking to the Father? Is he talking to his disciples? Or is he taking in the whole crowd? I think all would apply. He says, you're a faithless generation. And he asks rhetorical questions regarding the time he has left. How long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? He's talking of his impending death. He has set his mind towards Jerusalem at this point. He knows the cross is coming from the transfiguration. His mission is set. I have come to die. Guys, I can't be with you forever right here on earth teaching you. I've been showing you, I've been explaining to you miracles. You notice what's going on here. You've got to pay attention. You have to believe. And they don't. They're still struggling with these things. The picture is becoming clearer, but it's not all the way there yet. And he's referring to the time that he has left. What he's trying to explain here, it's not the size of our faith. Scripture says that the size of a mustard seed alone will move mountains. It's not the depth of the faith, but it's the direction of the faith. It's not the potency of the faith, but it is the person of the faith. That's what's important. That's what's most important. A little bit of faith in a great Savior goes a long way. What we would see here is that even though I said faith is a little bit difficult, and it is at times, but we all have faith in things. If you drove a car here this morning, when you got to the parking lot, you didn't undo the seatbelt, open the door in case the brakes didn't stop you, you would be able to jump out before you hit something. We don't do that because we have faith. When we put our foot on the brake pedal, we're going to stop. So we have faith. We've produced faith in things all morning long without thinking about it because we have trust in things. And if Jesus, for all these years, has never let us down, why not trust in him? That's what's important here. That's what we have to understand about what's going on. So when we don't believe, we look at Hebrews chapter 11, and it reads, "Without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever will draw near to God must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household." Noah trusted God. God had never let him down. And when God says, "Noah, I want you to build a boat where there is no water." Okay, God. I don't understand, but you've never done me wrong, so I trust you. I'll build a boat where there is no water to save himself and a remnant of all the animal kingdom because he had faith. And that's what it comes down to. And in verse 20, we see this demon, when he's being brought to Jesus, he throws a fit. He throws the boy into a convulsion and throws him to the ground, and he's rolling around and he's foaming at the mouth. Why? Because evil can't stand before God. And he knows that his time is short. And it's about to be over for him. Jesus asked about the duration of the boy's possession. How long has he been this way? And the father responds that he's been like this since childhood. So for years, his parents have seen him suffer. And they've had to watch as nothing could be done. And they've tried and they've done everything I'm sure that they thought was possible. But they couldn't fix it. They couldn't fix the situation. In fact, the father goes on in verse 22 to tell how the demon attempts to destroy the host. Just like we've seen with other demons, they had this intent to take life. They want to destroy life. And so this demon at times had thrown him into a fire to try to burn him to death. It had thrown him into water to try to drown him. And no doubt this boy was bearing the scars. He was bearing the scars of the attacks of this demon. And it was very real to these parents. And in fact, you have to think that there was some kind of a vigil taking place of his family, that somebody had to constantly be watching him. Not like a toddler that you're afraid is going to get hurt, but because the demon, they were afraid would attack him and try to kill him. And so this is constantly on the parents' mind and constantly in their hearts that they've got to watch their child, to protect their child. And this has been going on for years now. And there's probably permanent damage from it. The father's request comes. If you can do anything, Jesus, if you can do anything, have mercy on us and help us. And it's hard to see what he's getting at here. Perhaps he had doubts because he had already taken this to the disciples. And the disciples being Jesus' representatives, and they couldn't do anything. But maybe you, Jesus, maybe you could just lessen the severity. Maybe you could stop the attacks, or maybe you could take away the deafness and the muteness. Could you do something? Could you do anything? Jesus' response is spectacular. If you can. If you can. Healing was not an issue for Jesus. Faith is the issue here. Divine ability is not the concern. Faith is the concern. Jesus had healed in the past. In fact, he had raised from the dead. But apart from faith, he had done it many times apart from faith, but this time he chose to emphasize the necessity of faith. And he says, anything can be done when there is faith. In fact, his words are, all things are possible for one who believes. All things are possible for one who believes. Well, I believe that I can fly, but I'm not getting off the ground. Well, there's two problems. One, you don't really believe that. And two, that belief would be outside of God's will. So it's not truly a belief. It's not a trust. It's really an attempt to test God, which is a dangerous thing. All things are possible for one who believes. These are amazing words that we get to live by as a people of God, as we are a people of faith. Dr. Harlan Roper put it this way when he talked about faith. He said, it's a kind of faith that would take a man who has a headache to his medicine cabinet. And he reaches in for a bottle, and the bottle says headache medicine. And he believes that it could take away his headache. He believes that it is going to help him. But he takes it back and puts it back on the shelf and walks away still contending with the headache. Now he can say he believes, sure. But it's a dead faith that won't act upon that belief. So we can sit back and say, I believe God, I trust God, I have faith in God. But words come easy. Actions are a little bit harder to come by. And so that's what we deal with here. The Father's response when Jesus says all things are possible in his belief, his response is immediate and it's impassioned. He recognizes that he has an imperfect faith, and he's pleading now for Jesus to help him to have the faith that he needs. My faith is weak. Jesus, help me in spite of me. He says, I believe. Help my unbelief. Jesus, I believe, but help my unbelief. He knew inside himself that he was struggling, that he was having a hard time, but he believed Jesus. That's why he brought his son to him. But he says, Jesus, I struggle. And this should be our plea as his people. Jesus, I believe, but help my unbelief. Sometimes the day is too long. Sometimes the troubles are too big. Sometimes they just seem to go on and on, but I believe, but help my unbelief and the things that I should do. So when Jesus sees the crowd coming in verse 25, he moves to heal. He again doesn't want to make a spectacle of the thing. He's not here to draw attention to himself. That's not why he came. But out of his compassion, he wants to heal. He wants to restore. He wants to make things right again. So he commands from absolute authority for the demon to leave. You will leave him and you will never come back. In this, he demonstrates his deity. And if we put all these pieces together that he keeps showing us, he is God. He is God who has wrapped himself in flesh and walked among men. From the words he said, from the things that he's done, from the actions we see take place, from healing to raising the dead to casting out demons, we understand that he is God because he demonstrates right here very clearly he has power over the supernatural. Even the supernatural things have to obey him. It would have been impossible at this point for that demon to stay where he was. And he knew it. He had no ability to stay there any longer because Jesus in authority had cast him out and made him leave. In fact, the demon at his command, which is apparently a very violent demon, convulsed the boy one last time and threw him to the ground. And the boy is there lifeless. It throws him so hard, the boy seems to be without life whatsoever. And the people say, well, he cast a demon out, but unfortunately it killed the boy in the process. He's dead. But Jesus, like he had done in chapter 5 to Jairus' daughter, he reaches down and he takes him by the hand and he lifts him up. And life is there. What a beautiful picture of salvation. When there is evil, a life that is rotten, that it is out of control, but Jesus comes in and at his command, it's taken away and new life is given and he raises us up. He raises us up to newness. Therein is the picture of salvation. And it's a beautiful, beautiful picture that he shows us here in what he is doing. Now the disciples are confused and they're troubled. We couldn't beat this thing. We couldn't throw it out. And they want to know why. Perhaps their pride had damaged them as they wanted to consult him. Friday, Jesus, can you come over here for a second? We need to talk to you. And remember, they've already been attacked by the scribes because they couldn't do it. Jesus, we want to talk to you alone for a second. Their egos have been bruised. And they want a private word with the Lord. Say, Jesus, what happened? Why couldn't we do this? Why couldn't we fix this situation? Every time we fail is a time for introspect and self-examination. To understand why. Why did I fail? And most oftentimes we'll see that when we fail, we've allowed sin to creep back into our lives. We've allowed sin to come and take a foothold again. And then we fail, then we ask the question, why? And it seems to be the case with the disciples here. There are obviously demons who are more powerful and more obstinate than others. And he says to them, this kind cannot be driven out except by anything but prayer. Now, he's not saying some demons need prayer, some don't. Those are not the words that he's conveying here. He's saying that their dependence had become upon themselves. He's saying that this is spiritual warfare. The disciples had become very prideful in their own ability and weren't relying upon God. These 9 disciples, as they sat down there below waiting on Jesus and James and John and Peter to come back, and the crowds came around them, and they saw opportunities. It is though it seems. They saw an opportunity to get some attention for themselves. Got any sick people? Got any demons to be cast out? Bring them on down. We'll take care of it for you. And they become very prideful and very egotistical about the abilities that they thought that they had. But we know their abilities were power they'd been granted by God. And so when they of their own power tried to cast out a demon, the demon says, who are you? You have no authority over me. And so in their pride that they had let creep back in their lives, they thought they were something special. They thought they were going to get the glory, not Jesus. They were concerned about the attention they were going to get. Hey, we're going to be the fan favorite for a while now. Jesus is gone. He's out of the picture. We can handle this without him. They found out differently. He says by prayer. Prayer means and requires humility. It's prayer is saying to God, I'm not number one, you are. I'm not the source of power, you are. And it's putting things in the right perspective for us. And understanding that God is the one who sits on the throne. God is the one who has the ability and not us. The disciples lacked that. And they couldn't accomplish this here in their own pride and their own power. Failures hurt. When we fail in life, it hurts. Brings us down. It puts a dent in our pride, and it just twists our ego all up because we've let it creep back in. But you know what? Just like working out, just like exercising, when you exercise good and it hurts and it burns, but you know that's painful, but you know that there's benefit. On the other side, I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be in better shape. I'm going to be healthier. Well, sometimes failures in life, the pain that comes from them, sometimes spiritually, they make us stronger. They make us healthier, and they draw us closer to God. If we're willing to say, okay, God, I get it. My pride got in the way. I'm going to empty myself out, and I'm going to turn it all over to you. And I'm going to use these words. God, I believe. Help my unbelief.